Okay, so everything's set on the recording front. Now we can go ahead. So again, I'm just waiting for a status update from you guys. Make sure you have VS Code. Make sure you have a GitHub account. And now what we'll be downloading next is something we call Github Desktop. And I'll be using this to explain a lot of the GitHub terminologies. And I'll explain how you can also use Git Desktop before you understand Git Bash, which will be a sort of language that you use for pushing your code from your code editor to GitHub. But for today, we'll use GitHub Desktop to make it simple for everyone, right? And so I'll drop this link as well as the final thing you need to install. Okay, so far so good. I hope I've not lost anyone, right? So we have 3 tools that we have to install. 3 tools that we have to install. 2 that we have to install. 1 you need to have an account on. The first one is VS Code, which is going to be your coding environment or integrated development environment, IDE, as stated. The second thing will be make sure you have GitHub Desktop, right? For those of you on Windows, instead of having to download Git today, just download GitHub Desktop. The entire process on how you download Git and you install on Windows will be able to explain. If you're on Linux and Mac, which is iOS, you don't have to worry about that. But download GitHub Desktop, the tool. But for people on Windows, we will explain the guides for downloading Git before you start using Git Bash. Okay. And then the final thing is to make sure you have a GitHub account. Okay, so 3 things that I want us to finish by in the next few minutes so that we can go ahead and get started with our really packed sort of order of events. Okay, so we have those 3 things, and then I'll go ahead and start us off with Markdown. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Okay, I want to get a couple of VSs on VS Code, a couple of VSs on GitHub Desktop, and a couple of VSs on GitHub so that we can go ahead and start without stress. In the meantime, let me see if I can open a file here. Okay, any yeses? Any yeses, guys? Time is not on our side. Everything is clear. Once again, I'll repeat. Download VS Code. The link is up there. Second, download GitHub. Not download GitHub. Open a GitHub account if you don't have one. The third one is make sure you download GitHub Desktop, and then we can get started. For those of you who already have Git and no Git, don't worry about this as well. We'll go through Markdown. That will be people who've done a tech course before. This might not be so new to you guys. Okay, I just want a status update, guys. I know we are many. I just need like 3 yeses. How many people have VS Code? Drop a yes on the chat there. Okay, VS Code, GitHub should be good. And then let's go ahead and get ourselves started. Keep typing GitHub instead of GitHub. That's a bit sad. Okay, let's see that. Actually, I'll do it from Zindua School. Awesome, guys. Cool. I just need a couple yeses. Let me see. What's the status? Yes, yes, yes. All good. We have some people who are with us. Please make sure you at least have VS Code on your laptop as I take you through this process. So the first thing, I'll go ahead and explain what we use GitHub for and why it is essential, and why Git is an essential thing. So whenever you're working on projects as a developer, collaboration is a really important aspect of it, right? And when you're collaborating with a team of 10, 30 people on the same code base, you want to be able to get an updated version of the code base, right? That's why it's called version control. And at the same time, you want to see what changes were effected, right, across that code base whenever anyone updates the code, and you also want to see who it came from. And that's what version control is all about. It does exactly what version control says. It controls version, whereby you're able to collaborate with multiple people and track the different changes that were added to your repository. And that's why Git is a really important thing, because most of the time we're not working in silos as developers. Most of the time you'll be working with a team of people to achieve different sort of elements of a particular project. One of the best sort of tools for version control is GitHub. There's other sort of solutions in the market. I'll type them here on the chat. Some of them include GitLab. If you guys might have heard of GitLab, or Bitbucket as well. So we do have other sort of solutions in the market, right? But GitHub is by far the most popular, also because it has a really good free version that allows each and every single developer to just get, use it without so much. Whereas Bitbucket and GitLab would be more focused on enterprise. So you might end up working for companies where the sort of Git tool they use is different from GitHub, but it will still be using the same Git that you use, so the process will not be so different, just a different tool at the end of the day. Cool. But also what we love GitHub for beyond that is the fact that you can also get to access, rather make some of your code base open source, and also access a lot of open source code that is already part of the community. The main thing is for that version control bit and being able to collaborate. But because the tool allows you to store your code in a cloud, right, it also allows you to open source your code, and you can also go ahead and look at very many different open source code over here. So a good example is today when I look at Markdown tutorial, which we'll be going through today. If I just come on GitHub and I search that over here, I'm likely to find someone who's already created a Markdown tutorial that we can easily follow, right? Okay, at least I hoped. This is not searched well. Markdown tutorial, not in the organizations in Duo School, but rather throughout the whole of GitHub. And you see, when I make that search, you can already see we have already existing code bases or repositories in this case that have already worked on a Markdown tutorial that you can go ahead and even have it like just save it for yourself and follow up, and I'll show you exactly how to go about all these sort of things. Okay. Now that we have an understanding of what GitHub is, or Git is in a very, very general sense, and the fact that it goes beyond just being a version control tool and a tool for us to collaborate, but where you can actually access other projects, most of them open source, right? Let us go ahead and understand the nuances of GitHub in the first place. So the first thing I want you guys to understand when it comes down to GitHub is what we call a repository. Okay, so I'll come here to my repositories, right, once I log in. And a repository is simply a folder with a code base for a particular project. Let me go ahead and explain that. So a good example here is, let me take a very easy one. I was working on, which one can I get here? Yeah, so let's say I'm into data science, and I'm working on a project which is the Boston House Advanced Regression, right? Because that is a project by itself, I'll go ahead and create a repository for that particular project, right? Where I'll be working on this entire code base, even if the code base involves a couple of facts. So today we'll try create one because we're trying to build a project for ourselves. Let's say we're trying to build a YouTube downloader. So I'll come out here to new repository under my repository tabs on GitHub, and I'll go ahead and create a repository here. So one, you'll be the owner most of the time, unless you're part of an organization where the organization can be the owner of the repository. And here what you're trying to create is a YouTube downloader, right? So that's exactly what you're going for. And the description, you can always write a small description when you're opening up your repository. Try make it short and descriptive. So this for us will be a Python script that allows you to download YouTube videos to a local folder, your computer folder. Something of that sort. Once again, I'm just trying to keep it light over here. You can decide to keep your code public or private. If you keep it private, only you can view it. If you make it public, it means like whenever someone searches for something on GitHub, your code base will be one of them. So people can actually see your code and they can fork your code and use elements of your code. So that's a really important thing here. But for this one, we'll make it private. It's just a code base for myself that I'm trying to work on. Now, the next thing we want to ask ourselves is, what is a README file? Here, they're telling you to initialize this repository with a README file. A README file is a Markdown file, and we'll be talking about Markdown for a significant part of today, where you get to put the long description of your project. This whereby you will not only describe your project, but if there's an installation procedure, you'll also define it here on your README. So this is like the mini doc for your project in particular. So whether you have like an idea, let's say I've created a website, right? And someone wants to run it on their local computer, I'll definitely have like a description on how to install it, how it works. I'll list my dependencies, like what things need to be installed for this code base to work, right? As part of that, I'll describe what the code does, right? Very, very clearly. At times, even for things such as data science, it might even involve like talking about the data, right? What columns are there on the data? So you can structure your README file in different sort of ways, but this is just that long description. They put it extremely, extremely well. That we'll talk about. Like for this project, we'll go ahead and just put a mini long description there. So I'll add a README file here. The second thing we want to understand here is, what is a gitignore file, right? So a gitignore file, right, is a file that details what files should not be followed or tracked whenever you're moving code from your local computer to GitHub, which is online. When you're doing software development, you'll realize that there's some things that you do not need to make public. Most of them are usually config files when you think about it. At times, your computer also caches some files. So you'll see like there's versions that you did not create. You'll see that on VS Code even when you work on it today. But necessarily, it's just a cache that has been put there very, very quickly, but it's not necessarily code base. It's going to be deleted. Like you can delete and everything works extremely well. It's just there on your computer. Once again, this will vary from computer to computer as well, or what tool you're using. At times, you don't also want that, right? And defining that these files need not be included, right, in the main repository is a really important thing. A good example is, you guys might have heard of WordPress, right? And WordPress is one of the, let's say, low-code tools for web development. However, it's usually extremely vulnerable because people always find a way to access the WP config file, right? So that's like one specific file in a PHP environment that you should not be sharing outside. So you also don't want to put that onto your GitHub thing. You want to make sure you obscure it as much as possible. So we'll always have such files. And this gitignore allows us to choose the files that we don't want to have them. I'll open the file once again. However, like as a beginner, you don't have to worry so much about it. Like I think whenever you start getting the hang of how this file is written, you'll be able to see how you can even add individual files to this. But for now, because most of these things happen based from language to language, like there's always like conventional files that need to be ignored, right? You can just come here and use whatever language you're using for that repository is what you choose as your gitignore template. So a good example is, this is a project that I want to work on using Python. So I'll just go ahead and choose the Python gitignore template, and that has already saved me a lot of time. And I'll open that file and you guys will be able to see how it is. And then the final thing is now the license, right? So this code is private, so I probably don't need a license for it. But what if I'm making an open source code? You can go ahead and choose any license that you want over here. The most common ones will usually be the MIT license, the Apache license, or the GNU license as well, right? Also, you can go ahead and learn about the nuances of these licenses. Feel free to do that in your time. MIT license will cover you most of the time pretty well. If you're trying to build something commercial, but you want it to be easily distributed, GNU is also a good one. I see a lot of applications that work on plugins where they license with a GNU, but most of the time Apache or MIT will serve you just right. Once again, I'm not a lawyer here, so I can just tell you things I've used before, but there's definitely websites where you can learn about the differences between these licenses to see what's best for you. Probably not important. When you're learning, you're just trying to build code. No one's trying to steal your code when you're still a beginner, right, or an intermediate. But as you start building proprietary stuff, you want to start thinking about the licensing aspect of it. If you're building content on GitHub, right, you also want to license it in the right way as well. And we can talk about what Creative Commons means. How do you make it share alike? People only can share something that's alike to yours. Do you want it to be non-commercial? So there's different sort of nuances to a license that you can go ahead and study later when you actually need to license something proper. But here I'll just go ahead and choose a conventional MIT license without so much problems. Okay, so we spent a lot of time on setting up just a repository, and that's how you create your repository. That's how we create our folder, which will contain all of our coding files. And then now we'll go to the next step. Okay, the reason I'm taking you through this right now is so that we can buy as much time as possible to make sure everyone has GitHub Desktop and VS Code on their laptop. Cool. Now, this is the README file. You've already seen, like, as soon as you get your repository, you'll be able to see your README file here. This is whereby we can put the long description. Automatically, it will always take the repository name and the description that you've put over there. However, because of my OCD, I'm going to change this and remove that dash. Once again, the format of this file is something I'll be showing you guys as we go through a bit of Markdown and how to write Markdown, right, and where Markdown is important. Cool. And then I'll make this a heading 2 as well. So making headings is as simple as just adding things like that. Okay. So there we go. And then here I can go ahead and just put like a description of the project, which should be light. I'm going to just choose lorem ipsum here just to save myself time. I don't want to think about it. So I'll just auto-generate this text really fast. Awesome. So this will be the paragraph I'll be using for most of my things today. It's actually not the original lorem ipsum, but all good, all good. So I'll put in a description there. Probably here I want to add contributors. If I'm working on this project with a couple of people, I can have it over there. I can also have a section where I talk about the license, right? Probably this code is Creative Commons license. You can just copy and paste wherever you want. We have no problem there. I can go ahead and detail things about the license as well. Because this Python thing does not have a lot of installation problems or dependencies here, it's not a big thing. Most of the things will be part of imports. I can just go ahead and write there a short installation guide as well, right? And then if I need that. So once again, different readmes will look differently. And here I can detail the different steps. Keep in mind, I'm not writing things as they're supposed to be written. I'm just trying to clear up this very fast to show you that a readme is where you can write all your steps, just trying to give examples of what things. So this code base has been built by the following, blah, blah, blah. You can do all those sort of acknowledgements. So you can have a lot of things listed on your README just to give a general sense or description of your project as well as how people can use it. And then I'll go ahead there and the first term we've learned is a repository. The second term we're going to learn here is a commit. What is a git commit? And a git commit is whenever you submit changes to GitHub on your code base. And this README file is part of my code base. Because I have changed some of the text, I can go ahead and make a commit, right? So I'm committing these changes in the first place. But to make a commit, you always need to have a commit message. And the commit message over here is I updated my README, right? That's the default one that they've given me. However, you always need to make this as descriptive as possible, right? So at times you're working on code, probably you changed aspects of your code that meant that you added the API you added the API code for getting things from a Google Sheet, right? You can just call it something like Google Sheet API code, something like that sort, or you added a file. Just make it descriptive so that because this commit changes will come beside some of these files, people can know exactly what these changes encompassed. Particularly when you're sharing your repository with a lot of people, you want to be able to read a commit change and to understand what the series of changes was covering. right? So that someone can easily follow the different versions that you have on GitHub. But it's okay. For now, let's leave that. You can also have a longer description of it if you want to be very, very descriptive. Particularly in very technical projects, you want to also have that extended description. But because it's a README file, there's not so much to it. I'll just leave it as a commit where the commit message is update README. There's not so much. Probably I can go ahead and say here, I added a long description, contributors and license, right? That's a good example of what you could, how you could categorize that. And then we commit those particular changes, and we're set. Now, when I go back to my repository, I can see an updated README file over there, all good with contributors, with a license and a good installation guide, and that's fast file. Probably the next sort of commit I can make to this is add a file, which will, let's say, be my main Python file. So let me just go ahead. I can add a file from GitHub, right? Let me go back to my repository. That's my README here. So another commit I can do here is, let me add a file, call it hello world here, or hello.py, just one of them. So let's go for it. Create a new file, right? And this will be a new Python file. It's going to be called hello.py. Right, all good. And in my hello.py, it's going to be extremely simple. I'll just come out here and say print hello world. This is my first Python script there, right? Okay, all good. So that is my fast code there. I don't want to add a lot of things. It's my new commit. So I'll make that commit by saying create hello.py, right? I've not added a lot of things in there, so that's fine. I can just make a new commit. So I've already started my code base. I have some code. I have a proper README as well. I've already made 2 commits, so I've committed new changes there. And that allows us to understand what our git commit means in the first place. Anyone with a question? So far, so good. Anyone who's stuck? So far, so good. Okay. Now I want us to get back to this gitignore file before I now go to GitHub Desktop in a few. Right? And you guys can already see the sort of files that have been listed here that should be ignored. You'll see the cache files, like the PyCache is one that they ignore. So you'll see like distribution or packaging files are also being ignored. So because this is a Python repository, they've already gone ahead and listed the different types of files that need to be ignored. You don't need to know this for now, but I'm just trying to show you the gitignore file, which I had mentioned earlier that I would show. Okay, I don't know that there's a question there. I don't know whether anyone's lost. I don't know whether you guys can hear me. It feels like we have a sizable number of people. We'll keep pushing it. Awesome. Now let's go to the next step now. I have this repository on GitHub. Now the question is, how do I have it on my local environment? That is the big question that a lot of us have today, right? How do I move this sort of file to my local environment so that I can work on code, on a code editor where I can run things, right? I cannot keep adding files on GitHub where I can't run things and test whether things are working, all that kind of stuff. I want a code editor whereby I can come out here, just think about this. I can come somewhere here and just do, have fun with my code. I can write different things, import numpy as np and all those sort of things and test out my code, run it, right? All that kind of thing. So good example. Let me just print hello world here because I want that running environment, right? And now I know because of this, right? I can just click. Where's that sort of thing? Why is my thing so minimized? Let's go ahead. I need to clean this up at some point, but it's fine. Yeah. Okay, there we go. I think this is good. Should have the thingy here. Okay, so let me just run that as well. And as soon as I run that sort of code base of mine, that code of mine, at least I'm able to get an output down here on the terminal. And you can see it's actually printed hello world over here. So I want to work in an environment where I can do all this. I can visualize the output of my code before I push it to GitHub, like just typing hello.py, see if everything just works like that. Okay, probably everything works like that. the moment you can code without mistakes. But most of the time, you want to be able to run your code. Most of the time, you want to be able to see the test results as well. Most of the time. So now we want to make sure that this repository that we've created, this YouTube downloader repository, that we can actually access it on our local computer. And that's why GitHub Desktop comes in. And now, if you have GitHub Desktop, I just want us to open that GitHub Desktop, right? I hope you guys can see my screen there as I bring in GitHub Desktop. Ignore this thing that I'm working on, but we'll come to this as well. Okay, now I want us to come out here to our GitHub Desktop, and I want us to, first of all, clone a repository, and I'll explain what all these things mean. So cloning a repository is when you already have an existing repository on GitHub that you want to clone to your local computer. So you're trying to copy it to your local computer so that you can also have a version locally on your computer as well. So this repository, you can see it's trying to load. My internet is a bit slow. And then I'll go ahead and choose the location of this. So once again, I'll look for YouTube downloader. Yeah, there is a lot of YouTube downloaders because of that Zindua repo. Let's go ahead and see. If you guys see it before me, just let me know. It should be close to Y. There we go. So this is the repository that I want to clone, that YouTube downloader one that we've just created, right? And then I'll go ahead and choose where it's supposed to be. So for me, I'll have my file somewhere here on documents, somewhere there under Zindua, and it's all going to be cool. And I'll have my folder on that thing, so I can organize myself on where my files will be on my computer. If you have OCD like me, that's all good. Okay, not really. I think I'm playing with something that people could actually have sickness of. So just ignore that. But I'm just saying, yes, choose your folder there and then click on clone. And clone allows you to just copy an existing repository from GitHub to your local computer. That's what we mean by Git cloning in the first place. So there we've gone ahead and we now have the YouTube downloader. I just want to show you practically. If I come to my local computer, I go to documents, right? And I go to the same place where I had that, right? You can see now I have a new folder called YouTube Downloader. And when I look at that folder, I can see hello.py, I can see my license file, I can see my README file, which I also created in the first place. So that's the first sort of step, which is cloning, right? Awesome. Now there's a second thing that we need to think about over here, which is how do you create a repository from your local computer and then push it live to GitHub. So I'll go ahead and take an example. Come to the same folder I was in, documents, right? Now, what if this folder that I just created, GitHub Markdown practice, right? This is a folder this one's the one that I created on GitHub. This is the one that I created locally here that I just put my hello world over there. It's called Git Markdown practice. It's the one I have opened on VS Code anyway. We'll talk about that in a few, right? Now, I want to go ahead and, have this repository on GitHub. So what do I do now? What we'll do here is we'll just create a new repository there, right? So it's like we're just going ahead and creating a new repository, not a problem. We'll look for the repository name here, which will be Git Markdown practice. Git Markdown practice, and then we'll go ahead and find the description. This is actually the file where we'll be writing most of our Markdown code today here. So this will be Markdown tutorial for Zindua students. Okay, that is fine. And then the location is well chosen. I have no problem with that. I'll go ahead and I would choose a git ignore for this because it's not going to be Python or anything. And I'll choose an MIT license for this. And we'll definitely initialize this repository with a README. It's actually only going to be a README because we are learning Markdown anyway. Awesome. So that's fine. We've gone ahead and created that repository. Now I can come to my current repository, just click up there. And the first thing I need to do is just publish the repository. Very, very simple. And you can publish the repository to your own account, right? Which means leaving that blank. But I'm part of an organization and I want you guys to access this after this call. So I'll put it as part of the Zindua code, Zindua school repository. So I'll go ahead and publish that repository over there. Okay. So we have learned a couple of terms now. We've learned, not terms, we've learned how to clone, and we've also learned how to publish. So you've learned how you can start off from your GitHub account and have the repository on your computer. And you've also learned how you can start from your computer, which is have a folder on your computer, and then push it to your GitHub account. But I know you guys don't trust me, so let's go ahead and see whether this is actually available, right? You guys want to come to that Zindua School side and see whether we are able to get that repository that we've just added right now. So I'll do exactly that. Awesome, and you can see the repository we have at the top is Git Markdown Practice, which is the Markdown tutorial for Zindua students, right? It's private as well, I'll make it public, right? And there you can see we have the README that we initialized, we have the hello.py that we had created as well over there. So this is all good, and we'll be building upon this sort of README slowly and slowly. Awesome. Now, those are two really well gotten skills. Any questions so far, so good? Right, by 8:30 we're moving to Markdown, and I'll be a bit faster when we get down to the Markdown things. Awesome. Now the next thing I want us to understand, right? So I have Git Markdown Practice, that's fine. If I want YouTube download, I could come and get it over here as well. It's fine. You can always switch between the different repositories you're working on without a problem. Now I want us to ask ourselves a question. What happens if I make changes to my code now? So let's imagine I want to add an if statement here, and I say if true, right, print hello world. But then if it's false, I think I've forgotten Python. Okay, if true, print hello world, and then else, I want you not to print anything, right? So yeah. Else, I say print howdy, something of that sort. So all good. So I have new changes on my code here, right? An if-else statement that's very, very simple. So if true this, else that, that's extremely simple. Keep in mind that my file is actually on autosave, so I don't always have to keep saving my file. So it's always on autosave for me, which is cool, right? And now you can see when I go back to my GitHub desktop, I can see they've already triggered that there's a change that has happened. The red one is what has changed, so that print hello world has gone. And the new things that have been added are if true, blah, 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 all that kind of thing. So this Git will be able to see exactly what changed there, and it's going to mark the things that are leaving as red and the things that are new as green. And anything that remains the same will always be marked as blue. You'll see that for your code as you keep doing that. So here I'll just go ahead and commit. We talked about committing as well. So I'm committing a change, which is pretty much updating that hello py. And what I did here is add an if-else statement, right? Simple as that. Once again, don't I'm just giving this for an example here. You want to describe things that actually, because this is very obvious. Like when someone sees my code, they can see that. But you want to always state the less obvious here as you're trying to be descriptive as well, but always be descriptive, right? And then I'll commit to main. And when I commit, that's when we go ahead and do something we call a git push, right? So I think there's someone who's unmuted. Go ahead, Victoria, you have a question? Okay, that's fine. Cool. So now when you commit a change, we've committed a change to our local repository, but we want to make sure that it's in sync with what we see on GitHub. So what we usually do is we go ahead and do a git push. And a git push is when a change has happened on your local computer and you want to update it on the GitHub repository, the cloud version of it, right? And that's what we call a git push. So we are always committing. Committing is when you make the change, right? And then git push is when it's coming from local going to the cloud, which is the shared one, where you'll be collaborating with people, because people will only access your GitHub thing, right? Like even you guys will have access to some of this GitHub repository. So you push changes to that sort of thing, right? Now, if I come back to GitHub, right, and I reload this repository, I should be able to open my hello.py, and those changes should be there, right? because I've pushed my changes here. And you can see now it's actually an if-else statement. So there we've done a git push. Now the question is, let's imagine you're collaborating with 10 different people. So someone goes ahead and makes a change to this code, which you do not have present on your local computer. So let's imagine someone who's part of the call, Chris, for example, goes ahead and makes additional changes to this. I'm going to add the changes here manually on GitHub because Chris would have pushed it from his computer. So it's going to randomly appear on GitHub. Okay. If okay, so yeah, so if x is equals to 0, I want us to print true. Else if x is greater than 1, let's see, if x is less than 0, let us print that. And if x is greater than 0, I want us to print something else. Probably we print howdy. And then else, right? Probably this is what we needed. Else, right? We just want to go ahead and print no output. Again, I'm using just a simple print statement here. Nothing difficult. Cool. So there's some changes that have been pushed by someone else. I'll just go ahead and quickly commit this as update that, blah, blah, blah. Let's imagine someone else pushed changes to the GitHub account, but you want to access them, right? All good. So that's fine, right? There's some changes there. Now, how do we get it onto the local computer? This is where we'll go ahead and do what you call a git pull. The first one you are pushing. Now you come back to your GitHub desktop, and what you're going to first of all is fetch origin. Fetch origin means checking whether there's any changes that have been made on your GitHub account, on the repository, that are not necessarily on your local computer. And you can see there's one commit. This will always tell you the number of commits that have been made from the origin, right, which is the cloud version. So we have like one commit there. So for me to keep building on this code, I definitely need to pull and make these updated changes before I go ahead and build up on that particular code. So I'll go ahead and pull. So that's a git pull here, right? And now when I go back to my VS code, I can see that my code has actually changed, right? So those changes have been effected thanks to that sort of git. And now I can continue building upon my code based on where Chris left me off with that particular one commit as well. Any questions? You've learned how to git push, you've learned how to git pull, you've learned how to do commits. You guys know what a repository is, you know how to open one, you know what a git ignore is, you know what a readme is. We've learned a lot, and we've also explored a bit of licenses. So there's different sort of concepts on Git that we won't cover today because of time, but these are things that over time, as you start working on projects, we'll start getting into it, which is the branching aspect of Git, right? Where can you start having branches in your Git where you're pushing changes, but they're going to a particular branch. And then once a branch has a couple of changes and they've been tested, then they are merged to the main branch, which is what you now push out on deployment, in production, right? So most of the time when you're working on code, it's not usually very, very quick here where we only have one branch where changes are happening and you're pushing it to the main code base here. You'll see a lot of people work knowing that there could be mistakes. So let's say I create an application today, right? And then tomorrow we start adding another feature. What we'll do is we'll create a GitHub branch. So as we're building that feature, our changes will be coming down to this branch, and then we'll do a final testing, and then you'll see someone who's mostly on DevOps will go ahead and do the final merge and then the deployment once everything is working well. So there'll be changes being tracked in different branches over time that not necessarily affect the main code base, that they can be merged with the main code base in the future. So there's a lot of concepts to learn in GitHub here. We're not covering today. We're just covering the most essential ones to get you started, at least with you guys getting to code and getting to use GitHub as much as possible. Another skill that we've not covered today that GitHub Desktop should help you through is everything you're doing with GitHub Desktop can actually be done using Git Bash. And most of the time, Git Bash is written on the terminal, right, of your VS Code or whichever other sort of code environment you're using. But because you don't want to overcomplicate this for you as you're getting started, we recommend you getting used to GitHub Desktop. We'll have a tutorial on Git Bash on the LMS as well, so that as you learn Bash, you already have a way to start making sure your code is on GitHub. You already have a way for you to submit your projects as you gradually learn Bash and then phase out GitHub Desktop from from your local environment and go fully Git bash, where you only have to open VS Code and worry about that once and for all. Okay. Now, the final thing, probably what I can talk about is what a fork is, right? So a good example is we opened this guy's repository, which is really, really good. So I remember first time I was ever on GitHub, I saw the word fork and I just didn't understand what it is. So if you get an open source repository like this, that's extremely good and covers pretty much all the content that we'll cover today. Okay, they even go an extra notch, even giving you how to do a sequence diagram. This is actually a really good tutorial. So we'll go ahead and fork it. So fork it means copying it to your local repository, right? So if I go ahead and create a fork, so you can see it's Luong's Kamorebi's thing. And what I'll do is I'll fork it and put it in the Zindua code repository so that you guys can have a version of it. And then I'll call it whatever we want here. So let's just call it Markdown tutorial, but I think we'll go for the small letter naming convention instead, right? So this is Markdown tutorial external. Let me call it external because we'll still have our internal Markdown tutorial, the one that we are building up today. And here I'm only going to copy the master. Once again, you can see these people have branches, so when changes come in, they're not pushing it to all, but the master branch is the one that's the main one with the live code most of the time. So that's the one we need here. Let's not talk about branches more than that today, but we'll go ahead and fork it, right? And now when we come to Zindua School, what that does is whenever you have an open source project that you want to have available in a repository, you want to build upon it, you want to fork it, put it on your Git repository first of all, and then you can build upon it. And now it should be here. It should be here. Where is it? Markdown tutorial external. Yes, so you can see on the Zindua organization, you already have that sort of Markdown tutorial. The external one, it's a fork. Even when you open it here, you'll be able to see that this is actually a forked project, right? Very, very clear. Awesome. And yeah, it kind of puts it. Now you can see that now, if I wanted to make changes to this, I know it's one of my repositories, so that means I can have it on my local environment. I can add changes. I can build upon it. This is good. So whenever you have open source code that you want to use to build your projects on top of, you can always fork them and then build upon them, right? However, if you want to contribute to open source, you don't want to go ahead and do this. You want to go ahead and request to make changes on the actual repository there, right? Most of the time, a repository will always have an issues and a pull request side. We'll talk about this in the future, not for today. Don't want to overcomplicate things. That allows you to contribute to certain open source repositories in different ways as well. Cool. Most of the time, issues will be whether there's issues with that particular code base that you're suggesting. Pull requests will be some changes that you're trying to push through as well. Cool. Any questions for us today? But I just want us to make sure that we understand how to use GitHub Desktop, how to open a repository on GitHub, at least how to fork, which is what we've covered today, so that you're able to work on your projects and make sure they are on GitHub as well as on your local computer, and you can build this very, very seamlessly. Cool. Now let us go to Markdown. We have about 30 minutes to do this, but I'd love a question. Guys, you guys are so silent today. You guys are so silent. Anyone who has a comment at least? Okay, it's a silent room. Now let's go to Markdown. What exactly is Markdown? Why do I need Markdown? Why are we learning Markdown today? Okay. So Markdown is the sort of formatting language. It's just a formatting language. Don't call it a programming language. It's a formatting language. Some of you might have learned, what is the name of this other formatting language that people use for academic papers? It starts with an L, latex. So some of you might have learned latex as well. If you've done statistics or something of that sort, that is fine. HTML is also, a markup language. All these are markup language. They allow you to, just edit out certain files here. And This is essential language because most docs that you'll work on as a developer will be using a Markdown format, and it's extremely easy to learn. For those of you who are in data science, even the Jupyter notebooks that you'll be using to build a data science code, I'll show you how that goes through here. So a good example here, I could go ahead and have like a notebook of mine, and it's going to be an IPython notebook, IPyNB, right? That will also use a bit of Markdown halfway through. So I can go ahead and have my code here, which is import numpy as np, right? Import pandas as pd, right? When you start learning a bit of those data science things, so I can run code. So let me import those files. But because this is a notebook, right? And a notebook is what data scientists use to run code and also have the text there. So here I can go ahead and start talking about some text that I'll have there, which is data sourcing. And here we are saying this data contains the following columns. Right, and then I'll go ahead and detail the columns there. All good. So it's fine. So I can have text. This is not NumPy, that's why we have an issue. So what this means is at the end of the day, I'll end up having a very descriptive notebook that has both the code and the descriptions in a way that someone can read this as a document, right? Because you're a data scientist, you want to communicate insights as you're looking for these insights through code as well. As you're running your machine learning algorithms and trying to find the optimal parameters as well. You're trying to go through this process and explain to people why you made certain choices and all that particular things, right? You guys, I'll send you like a repository that does this extremely well. But what you're using here is Markdown, right? In the same way, for those of you who will be talking about your README files and your description files that you'll have across your repositories, they're mostly going to be MD files. So it's an easy. It's going to take you about 30 minutes just to get up to speed with it, that you'll end up using randomly. Even today, we are seeing some blogging platforms that use Markdown as the way to blog because it's that easy to learn and it's a smooth way for you to integrate with whatever you want to. Uh, it's a smooth way. It's easier to integrate with a lot of things, and that's why you're seeing certain blogging tools also allowing you to write on Markdown. A good example is Dropbox Paper. For those of you who use Dropbox Paper allows you to also type in Markdown. There's Hashnode as well that also does Markdown blogs. So it's a really common thing, right? Markup language for developers here. Okay, now that we understand that, how do we write it? So that's the next step for us. And here I'll make it extremely simple by looking at what are the sort of common things that you'll end up having in a document that you need to worry about. The first thing will be headings. Headings is extremely simple. Now, I know I'm on a screen, so I know my text might be a bit small. Can you confirm that? Is this better or is this too big? Okay, no one's communicating. I don't know if you guys can still hear me.
Yeah, I think the size is okay.
The size is okay? Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. So let's start with the headings. If you want to put a heading, all you have to do is put like one hashtag in front of it, space, and then you can put in your heading. That will be a heading 1. What if I want a smaller heading? Let's say a heading 2, then I'll probably just put 2 hashtags. If I want heading 3 as well, I can go ahead and put 3 hashtags. And you can go all the way till heading 6, which is really the smallest heading, right? In the same way that you want to have different headings on your Word document, is the same way you want to have headings of different size on let's say your Markdown file as well. And it's extremely simple. You're just adding hashtags. So I'll go ahead because I want to preview this, right? I'll go ahead and click this so that we can have a preview version on this side so that you guys can be able to see it, right? And let me minimize this if possible, so that we don't have to worry about that as well. So I'm just typing Markdown. Okay, so that's fine. So writing headings is as simple as that. Pretty much hashtags, and the last heading will be heading 6. So I can actually go ahead and finish that. Heading 5, heading 6, pretty much just like HTML. Okay, now we are done with heading. So how do we write paragraphs? Paragraphs, you don't have to do anything. You just go ahead and type whatever you want to type. That is a paragraph. This is a paragraph. However, what if you want to add bold text, you want to add italics text, and all these sort of things? What do? I'll go ahead and build upon my paragraph. So this is bold text. So if you want to add bold text, what you'll be doing is you'll be putting a star in front of that, 2 stars most of the time, at the beginning and at the end. So that makes the text bold. You can see that as well, right? So you enclose whatever text needs to be bold with that. Or this is italics text, right? For italics text, the same as bold text, all I need to put in here is a star at the beginning, only 1 star now, and only 1 star at the end, and you can see it does change to italics text over there as well. What if I want to make it bold italics? And I think this is extremely obvious. We can go ahead and combine the two. So put the 2 stars and 1 star for italics. So it's going to be 3 stars at the front and 3 stars at the back at the end, and we're good to go. Right. Awesome. Now I'm writing my text and I realize I need to add a link as well. So how do I add a link? This is a link, right? So most of the time you want to embed a link to your text in a way that someone can click on that word, right? And what you're going to do here is whatever word you want to make a link, you'll just put it in square brackets and then put normal brackets after it where you'll put the URL that it should take you to. So in this case, I want this to take you to the free course. For those of you who've not enrolled in the free course already, it is in duaschool.thinkific.com, right? Awesome. So this is a link. This is a link to our free course. Awesome, as simple as that. And you can see my text is linked there. So when someone clicks on that, it's going to take me to this web URL as well. All good? Awesome. So far, so good. We've started with a bang. We know a paragraph. We can see bold text. We can see italics. We can go ahead and do a link as well, right? I want us to go to the next thing. Now I'm doing my paragraph and I want to have a list, right? This is a list of items that you should learn as a software developer. Okay. Now, I'll be talking about our curriculum as we're doing a bit of Markdown. When you want to do a list, it's extremely easy. We have 2 types of lists. We usually have an ordered list, the one that has numbers. Those of you who know HTML are not new to this. I know some of you are on the HTML course on the site. And on Markdown is extremely simple. You just add a number at the front and it continues. So what do you need to learn in our software development course? The first one you'll be learning HTML and CSS for styling. So you learn HTML and CSS, right? Let me just say HTML, CSS, and responsive design. Okay, and then I'll go to number 2, and you can see it's already listing my items here on the right automatically there. Probably the second thing you'll be able to learn there will be JavaScript programming, right? Very, very simple, right? That's the next thing you want to learn. And then probably after that, you want to learn a bit of Python programming, which will also cover for your backend development. And then after that, number 4, we can go ahead and have like Django development. Actually, yeah, Django, which is the Python backend framework. So Django, Python development. So I can always improve my ordered list. The good thing about this ordered list thing is even if I want to add a number here, I don't have to worry about what number that is. It's going to, on the final output, the numbers will come in perfect order. For me here, so long as I just detail a number at the top, starting with 1 or whatever number I'm starting with, the progression will come out well. That's why here you can see 1, 2, 2, but here it's 1, 2, 3. There's not a problem over there. And probably what I missed out here is probably after you learn JavaScript, it's better to learn a bit of React front-end development before you go to the backend bit. That's what we do in the curriculum, right? And then probably when you clear this up, you'll be able to learn a bit of systems engineering. So here I can even have a number 9. I don't care about the number here. I know it's going to be ordered well. Systems engineering and cloud computing. Actually, let's just go ahead and say you want to learn AWS cloud computing at the end of the day. Okay, now the question people would ask here, what if I want to have nested lists? So what if I want to categorize all this as front-end development and then nest that within that? What I'll just come out here is, once again, just let me make my life easy. So let me say the first part is what we call front-end development, right? So I'll just click tab. Okay. Yes, I think I'm missing something on the front-end development layer, right? Let me see. It's a tab. Supposed to be tab. Trying to see. What do you mean I've not worked on a nested list all this while? This will be interesting. Yeah, there we go. It should be tab. However, I don't like the numbered version of the tab though. So just put a tab in front of the number and it's going to be nested. That's fine. So that's number 2 and that's going to be number 3. So that's first part. What if I just want to add another one here, which will now be the number 2 here, which is backend development. And in backend development, what you're trying to learn here will be now Python programming. Cool. And also Django, Python development. There's something wrong about these things of mine. So I think the first number should always be 1 for you to know it's nested. There we go. That is fine. And then number 3, we're going to learn a bit of cloud computing and deployment. That's going to be AWS cloud computing, not a problem. I think anyone should learn that regardless. Probably here, this person should also learn a bit of systems engineering. Yeah, which is fine. All good. So we've seen how you can put in ordered lists with numbers. Just make sure when you nest them that the first number is actually 1, right? So that it can be able to detect. I don't know whether it takes A. Okay, it only takes numbers. Sad as that is. There we go. So long as the first number is 1, it's going to work out extremely well. And now the same thing will happen for if we want to do like an ordered list, which is where we are doing a bulleted one. So this is going to be what the list of items that I should learn as a data scientist, right? I'm trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone because I was to take you through the curriculum at the end of the day anyway. And for a bulleted list, what you do is you put stars. You just put a star and space, right? What's the first thing you learn? So of course you need to be versed with Python programming, right? Which is the first layer because your data science curriculum will be based on Python, right? So you can see bulleted. I put a star with space at the top. The same star that we use for bolding is what we'll do here for listing. So first one is Python programming. And then after Python programming, probably I'll go ahead and do a bit of general data analysis. Yeah, where I'll get to do a bit of SQL and Tableau, you know. And then after that, probably my next thing is to do a bit of Python data analysis, right? And then after I do Python data analysis, I'll go ahead and do machine learning. And machine learning, we split it into 2 courses, right? So there'll always be machine learning 1, which is supervised learning, and then machine learning 2, which is the advanced bit, which is now unsupervised learning, right? For those of you doing data science. And then probably as a final one, you want to learn a bit of big data engineering. How do you build data pipelines where you get your hands dirty with things such as Apache PySpark, right? And Hadoop as well. So this is just a good example. Now, what if I want to categorize and say the first 3 courses would make you a data analyst, right? And then the other ones are now more advanced for machine learning focus. So let's go ahead and say these ones are data analysis. So if I want to be a data analyst, I should be well okay with these ones. So once again, we'll just nest by putting a tab. Okay, I don't need to double nest. I just need to want to go ahead and just nest those 3. You can double nest as you can see me do that, but just ignore this. And then Python data analysis. So we're good there. So far, so good. My list is looking good, right? Fine. How about for the second layer? I want these ones to also be nested. And what I'll do here is now, this ones I'll call it the machine learning pathway. If you learn both of them, yeah, so machine learning engineer pathway. Okay, and here you just need to learn supervised machine learning. I'm clicking caps lock instead of tab. And the second, machine learning, and probably big data engineering is for those of you who want to be a big data engineer. So awesome, we've learned how to do listing on Markdown as well. I want us to go to the next thing, which is how do we add code. At times you'd realize that when you're writing on Markdown, you also want to be able to detail like your code, right? You want to embed some code here as you're describing it. So this is my code output. I'll go ahead and just put it there. And what I'm going to use is a button called tilde. Now, let me just explain where the button called tilde is. The button below the escape button. It's not an apostrophe. It's the button below escape. I think regardless of whatever keyboard you're using, it looks like an apostrophe, but it's not. So if I put 3 of them at the beginning and at the end, in between these lines, I can be able to write code. So example, if true, it's like in Python, we go ahead and do print hello world. What this allows you to do is it allows you to highlight that text as code, so that people can know that this is actually code you're talking about. One really good thing you'll see is when you're reading a lot of developer books, at least on GitHub, that are written on Markdown, they'll highlight the code in similar fashion as well, using that tilde button. However, you can also go ahead and have code. I can have a code variable. Let's say I'm talking about a variable. I can also have code within a sentence. Okay, so if I said this following Python variable x is equals to 10, something of that sort, right? Say it's a lambda function or something really short, like this. Let me just go ahead and say like this. Whereby now instead of using 3 tilde buttons, I just use 1 tilde button, and in between I'll be able to write like x is equals to 10. Very, very simple. And that is able to highlight that as code as well. You can see that x is equals to 10 has been highlighted. This is when you want to have a cell that is dedicated to the code. This is when you want to embed your code within a sentence and continue writing. You can see that. Not a problem. All good. So we've talked about how to add code. We've done all that. Let's go to the next step, which is how to do a table. Are you guys with me? Am I taking it too fast? Am I taking it too fast? Anyone? You can just type, if the pace is okay, type a yes on the chat. No yeses? Okay, let's go for it now. Okay, so we are set now. We've done our code. Now I want us to do a table. What if I want to have a table within my text, right? That's the next thing. How do I do tables? So tables, we're going to look at the straight line button, which is usually beside the enter button. So I'll just do shift. The one with is it a backslash or a forward slash? Like when you do shift, you'll see that sort of sign, that straight line thingy. I don't know what they call it. I don't know what they call that sign. I'd really love to know what that sign is called. Awesome. So if I want to create a table with 3 columns, I'll go ahead and do column 1, right? And then I do column 2, and then I'll do column 3. Right, and that's okay. And what I'll do right beside that, I'll use the same button and then put 3 hyphens. Right, so I'll do that 3 hyphens to indicate the first column, 3 hyphens to indicate the second column as well, and then 3 hyphens to indicate the third column. And that is able to create a table for me. Now I can go ahead and add as many rows as I want to this table. Just separate the row items with the same sign that we're using to separate the columns, right? So this is row 1A, right? Let's say this is row 1B, and then this is row 1C, right? Actually, it would be best if we just call this column A, column B, column C, right? That's okay. can go ahead and do the same. So the same way we're doing it is the same way you can just keep going and adding as many cells as possible. And on this right hand side, it's going to come off as a table. You can see it's already taken a table structure there. So this is row 2A, this is row 3, row 3A, so on and so forth. I don't need to change all those numbers. That's how you do a table. Just separate the column names with that sort of straight line sign that I don't know what the name is, and then go ahead and make sure you have the separator between the header and the rest, and you can go for it right after that. Awesome. I want a question from you guys that we can go ahead in peace. As I take ideas on what I can go through here on this Markdown tutorial, but I've gone through most of the most important things. Okay, that's a table. We've learned how to build a table. That's okay. This guy's even go extra as to how you can put like lists within tables. I'll share this tutorial with you guys as well. Probably what I've not covered would be how to do like pre-formatted text. I'm not going to cover this because you'll hardly ever use it unless you're going extremely extra, but I'll teach you guys how to create this as well, right? I thank God he puts the link to the badges actually, so that's fine. And we also have emojis, so that's a good thing. So there's some things that we can do just for fun because we have some time. That's okay. The one thing I've not gone through is actually an image. An image is a bit of a problem. But let's go ahead and look for an image. So I don't know what we'll look for. Let's look for Python logo. With our Python bias, we'll keep up the life. So let's look for the Python logo here. Right, and I love this one. Now I want to have this image on that sort of repository. Let me take this one for example. I'll just go ahead and copy the image address, which is the link to the image. And whenever I have a link to the image, I can now come back to my code base, and all I have to do is just put an exclamation, right? And then I can have my image there. I think what I'll do is I'll put an alt text. I'll explain what alt text is. And then I'll put, yeah, that was a really long link. Yeah, that was a really long link. Yeah, but you guys see the image. So in simpler terms, an image is pretty much the same way we build a link, but we put an exclamation point in front of it. That's how you do an image on Markdown. So this is exactly how you do it on the Python logo. And what goes onto the square brackets is the alt text. Alt text is the text you always see on your website whenever an image has not loaded fully, right? So if something is struggling to load this image, it will show Python logo for the meantime. Alt text is also really important because it allows people who, let's say, are blind, have accessibility issues to be able to also consume content the same way because they can't see the image. They always look at the alt text as a way to know what's going on that particular image because all these other things can be gotten by Braille. And even for those of you who end up doing software development, just make sure you follow this really good practice of having an alt text on each and every single image for the sake of inclusivity. But it's also really good for your search engine optimization for whatever website you're working on. If you want to rank higher, you also Google would want to understand what's happening behind an image as well. The alt text allows you to do that. On Markdown, the alt text is pretty much like the text we use to put the link for. Yeah, so it's what goes onto the square brackets there. Okay, what other thing have I not hit here as I look at, I think I've hit almost all the important things. I'll open this link that they're suggesting, which is the badges. I'll also go ahead and open syntax diagrams. I think I'll leave it for you. So I want us to work on the final project for today, which is now our target for today. Awesome. Have good badges. Good badges. We'll be able to see some of them. Okay. So these are links that I think you guys should have. I'll drop them on Slack. If you're not on Slack, kindly join Slack because anything we talk about here will only be on Slack. Chris, I don't know if you can help me drop this as some of the resources on Slack because I think my Slack is very far off Sijafungua in the meantime. So that is some of the resources from today. I think that's doing flowcharts on Markdown, and then we'll talk about this shields.io. I'll definitely send a text on Slack with a proper update on all these things. Or Chris, just I think I'll compile them and then send them as a message at the end. I won't close these things. I'm sorry, guys. I hope you guys can still see my screen. I went off slightly. That means I've lost. No, I've not lost everything. It's still there. I didn't go off for a long while. But my recording is still okay. Thank God for that. Okay. Awesome, guys. If I'm with you, just drop a small yes on the chat so that we can go ahead. Final 7 minutes, you're going to be doing something interesting. Final 7 minutes, you're going to be doing something interesting. We've covered most things. The only one thing I'd go ahead and do is pre-formatted text. In pre-formatted text, you just put like that line and then you write, this is pre-formatted text. Right. Usually pre-formatted text is text that appears in sort of a card. Let's say if you had someone who did a quote, you do that. So you only need one of them. But if you need to, embed pre-formatted text within pre-formatted text, then you can always add that sort of greater than sign a couple times. This is nested pre-formatted text, right? So it nests it on the previous one. Nested pre-formatted text. All good. We're good now. We are set with Markdown. We're set with GitHub. Now I want us to do something interesting to practice our Markdown, which is how do you guys go ahead and build, right? I want you guys to come to my profile here, and you'll see that my profile has a really special README, right? Right? I have a really special README where it's not just the descriptions I have on the side. I've gone ahead and done a lot of customizations to my things so that people can have a paragraph about what I do, as well as the things I'm versed in as well. Just a bit of that. So that's all okay. This is going to be our way to practice Markdown, where we'll also be pimping up our GitHub with the Markdown we've learned. Of course, no tables, no much. It's all good. But before I get to that, I want to go ahead and make a commit, right? And the commit I want to make here is on that GitHub Markdown practice, what we've added is added Markdown tutorial. I've gone ahead and added Markdown tutorial notes, right? And there we go. We've covered everything, and then I'll push to origin. And now on the Zindua GitHub, you guys will have access to that. I'll make the repository public so that you guys can be able to see that. What I might have missed is here, you can actually open Visual Studio Code just straight up from your GitHub desktop anyway. That is fine. Awesome. I want a question before we go ahead and learn how to do this. Okay. So the first thing on being able to have a file that comes over here on GitHub is you'll have to create a repository that's similar to your name, right? Let me explain that. If I come down to my repositories, I have a repository called, like my GitHub username is Cyril Michino. So this Cyril Michino repository, right? I just create that. For those of you who are software developers, you can also build your site by having a repository called cyrilmichino.github.io. Not now. You learn that after the HTML, CSS sort of course. But for us, we're just trying to create our official GitHub README. So your username should be the same as the repository name. So what you're going to do is you're going to go on GitHub, right? Just go to your GitHub profile, right? Create a new repository and make sure that that repository is the same as your username so that it can come over here. That's the only thing we'll go ahead and add over there. But other repository, you don't have to do that. And then just create a README file. That's all you need on that repository, right? So I'll come out here and say, what I need to do is come and create a new repository. And I am myself, so Cyril Michino. Actually, I don't know whether this would work for something like a Zindua School. What if Zindua School had Zindua School, right? That's fine. That's interesting. How about Laughing Broccoli? That's fine. Cool. But for your username, just take your username. You're the owner. Make sure that it's very similar. That this is what I mean. The username I have here should be similar to the username I have there. And then this is the official README for your profile. Yeah, you can make this public because there's no special. At the end of the day, you want to make it public entirely, right? And then all you need is a Git README file. You don't need a Git ignore. You don't need a license. You don't need anything. This is your personal profile, and then we can create that sort of repository. Keep in mind, Markdown files are always .md files. So whenever I want to add another Markdown file somewhere here, right? So I can have more than one Markdown file. First of all, I'll go ahead and delete this sort of things. I don't need them. I was just using them for examples, and then make a commit. Move to trash. Python files are .py files. You'll see that JavaScript files are .js files. HTML files are .html. CSS files .css. That's all good. Let me first of all say delete unnecessary files. Okay, that is fine. We want to make sure we have a clean output at the end of the day. And now what I'm going to do here is README is a type of a Markdown file, but you can have another Markdown file, which is, let's say, my description.md, you know, and have another Markdown file within my document. It's just that any .md file will always be a Markdown file where you can write down your Markdown. That's why you can see it's a readme.markdown. All good. At times you'll need to have Markdown files in other folders across your repository. That's why we're saying that. However, here you only need a README file, and that's all that you need, right? Now this official README is where we'll be adding our things. Now, based on what we've talked about today, right? You want to go ahead and add your name, something of that sort, right? You're trying to customize your profile. You want to add a name. You want to add your bio here, right? So enter your bio very quickly. You'll see actually it will come with some sort of suggestions if you do it on your own profile, right? So have a general bio. You guys can see it from my GitHub how I did like just a general bio, and probably you can go ahead and add badges. I love coding in. I'm skilled in the following, right? Now here we're going to learn how to add badges as well. Once again, I'm working on Markdown. So the first one is heading 1. Second one is just the text here. So what does Indoor School do, or what do you do personally? And then here, because now we are a coding school, we're not necessarily an individual, we could go ahead and say is we teach programs, um, we teach the following skills and packages. Now, here it could be these are the skills and packages you know, right? And we'll go to this website called shield.io, where they have a couple of images for badges there for us that we can go ahead and add however we want. So they're actually images. So I'll go ahead and try find one. I hope you guys are with me. I just go to the repository. They used to have a really good repository. Let me see. That is watch. Test results, dependencies, downloads, platform version, license. Let me see build. Okay. How about I save my time because I know I can get this on GitHub. There's a repository with all this. Github.com. Okay. So I'll just come out here and I'll look for badges, right? All of GitHub, and I'll be able to get a repository with some of these badges that have been thought about. So this one has SVG one, so I can just go ahead and kill out the thing. I have they're readily available. Okay, not the one that I need. I think this one, lots of small badges, blah blah blah. Even this one might be good. I hope we get a really good one. And see whether they're images or what. Test coverage. I need the ones with like the things. Okay, I'll find you the badges. I'll find you the repository with the badges. But for now, let me see what badges are used. I'll just go to that sort of markdown. I know I used images. So there's someone who's created all these images. You can see it's a clean image, which is we'll just go to the shields here and just get the link. It's fine. We already know how to work on Markdown. So you can see for me, I just do like probably your title. You don't need to put your name. Just put your title actually, because I see your name will always be at the top of GitHub. Do a one line about yourself if you want to. You can have your general bio over there, and then talk about what you're skilled at. Once again, you're trying to create a portfolio for yourself, right? So this is the chance to add personality, and then your repositories, your featured repositories will come down there as well. And keep in mind, on that section of GitHub, like when I come back to my when I come back here, I'll always have a chance to pin some of my repositories as well. So that's a really important thing. So this is a really good way for you to customize your own portfolio. Let's go back to what you're working on. So because I'll find you the repository with the badges, what we'll just do here is you already know how to create an image. So to create an image, I just have to do this. I have to put square brackets, right? And then I'll go ahead and put the link in that sort of normal brackets, right? And probably this is one of the first skills I know is Python, right? And I want to preview this first of all to make sure that everything's okay. Okay. This is going to be a problem. So probably what I'd advise for the badges, because you want them to be side by side, is to use HTML rather than Markdown for this. I'll give it a last shot. No, I've seen the blend. I have HTML code embedded, right? Like my link ends here. Okay, I think that should be good now. That's fine. There we go. So the badge is simple. The same way we've learned Markdown, I'll just go ahead and see if we can add badges side by side. Make it easier for you. So I just put space, I add it side by side. The preview is coming off well. So I'll send you a place where you can get all these things. So we teach the following skills and packages, and there'll always be links to some of these badges that you can use. And then you'll also find you can follow me on the following platforms. And then there's also badges where we can also have like a badge for Gmail, a badge for what do you call it? Let's say a badge for your Twitter account. But now here there's a caveat. If you want people to follow you on those platforms, you want to add a link. So we need to have a badge that when someone clicks on, it actually takes them to your link. So what I'll do is I'll put this entire image into a square bracket, right? And then add the link over there. So for example, here we want to take people to the Zindua School website. Okay, and now let me preview. I hope it's not killed the image, so it's okay. So there we go. I can go ahead and do the same thing where I make a badge a link. And now when I hover over this thing, you can see that it actually, just look at the bottom right of my screen, so you can see it's actually linked to something. So if I click on it, it will take me to that sort of website, but I don't want to leave this particular page. Now you can always have the variable badges, different images there, create your thing. Badges make it look good. It's also a good way for you to practice the images. Feel free to be as crazy as possible on your bio, and it's going to appear. So long as the repository name is similar to your name, it's going to appear on the front end. You would have practiced Markdown. You can also feel free to experiment with emojis, which is what I said I will send to you guys. So for me, I'll just update this sort of thing for now. This is an organizational account, so it might not come off as we want it to, but we'll go ahead and see. If it does, then I'll be really happy. But I don't think it works for organizational accounts. It works for personal accounts though. Okay, all good. Yeah, it does not work for organizational accounts, but it works for personal accounts, just like you've seen it work for my own account. Okay, so that's a good way to practice your Markdown. It's a good way for you to start building up your portfolio on GitHub. And I'll share the links to all these resources like the flowcharts, how you can even have emojis on GitHub, right? All the notes we've shared today will also be shared as well. This video will be shared, but not immediately because we need to upload it on YouTube. Yes, that's it for today. I'll take 1, 2, 3 questions, and then we can call it a day by 9:10. So as I'm closing it, I really hope you guys are able to learn a lot today. I hope you guys are well familiar with Git. I hope you guys are familiar with the most common things on Markdown. And I want you guys to go home today and try out that mini project that we've talked about. Get your hands dirty with Markdown and get that GitHub portfolio looking good. So that as you start working on your projects, you already have a good base to start off, at least on a cute GitHub profile. Awesome. Now I'll call it a day there. I still want questions. I want questions. Questions on anything, not just Git or Markdown, but even on the curriculums, on the free course. Do you have any issues that we can solve in the next 3 minutes and then call it a day? Okay. We'll go ahead and do what we did when we started. If you've not joined the Slack channel, right? If you've not joined the Slack channel, here's the link to join the Slack channel. I think it was one of the first things I sent, right? That's where we'll be communicating all our updates. Yeah, guys, feel free to not be shy and ask me anything you want to ask me. And all the resources I've said, I'll share on the general slide on our Slack channel. So that's fine. So on the general thing, you'll get everything. So let me copy invite link. So if you're not on Slack, go ahead and do that. That's the Slack invite link. Cool. If you've not joined the free courses, whether you want to do data science or software development, here's the link to join the free courses, both software development and data science. Go ahead and do that as well. And all the resources that we've talked about today, you'll also have them on Slack. A question I can see here, does Visual Studio Code work the same way as PyCharm? Yes, you can use any code editor you want, right? Whether you want to work with PyCharm, you want to work with Atom, whether you want to work with Sublime, there's a lot of them. We just recommend VS Code because it's probably the most popular out there. But if you feel like things work better for you or you already have an IDE that you're used to, well and good. That's all fine. We even have online IDEs such as Replit, GitHub Code Spaces, which is actually built on VS Code, that you can use actually. But we'll always go ahead and recommend that whichever IDE you use, just make sure it's not an online one. You want to have it in your local computer. The online ones are good for certain scenarios, but you want to have most of these things on your local computer so that you can work on it regardless of internet. You can be able to customize your environment to fit your own needs in the best way that you can. I know Code Spaces is coming up a lot, but VS Code is probably the most popular one you'll get. Sublime comes close. I don't know about the rest. For those of you in data science, VS Code also supports IPython notebooks, which means you don't have to have Jupyter notebooks downloaded as well. So that's also a plus. That's why we keep recommending VS Code. But don't work with the code editor that you already have if you're already used to it. Any other question? Kindly repeat how to clone the existing repository on desktop. Once again, I'll come out here and I'll say, if I already have an existing repository on GitHub, I'll just come and click this clone repository link, choose the repository that I want to copy, and choose the location, and the next steps are self-explanatory. Awesome. So once again, if something's already on GitHub, it's on cloud, you want to have it on your local computer, that's what you do. If something's on your local computer, you want to push it to the GitHub cloud, the origin, just come here and create a new repository, right? It's going to prompt you to create a new repository and then choose what file that is. So if I come here and create new repository, I'll go ahead and choose what file I need to make a new repository out of. And then I'll create my repository name on GitHub and then add a git ignore license, however you want it, even a readme, right? In the same way that you could create a repository on GitHub. So GitHub Desktop also allows you to do that. But if you already had code on your laptop and you want to push it online, it's easier to use this because you can see you can do that extremely fast. Awesome. So this is one of our few workshops on Git and version control. We'll record it. We'll have it on the LMS as well. The other sessions will mostly be on Python for those of you doing data science, or on HTML, CSS for those of you doing software development, up until you join the core program, where you'll go through all the things that I might have mentioned today when I was talking about the ordered lists on Markdown, which are the for those of you doing software development, this is what you'll go through. For those of you doing data science, this is what you'll go through. And we encourage you. The free courses are only 3 weeks. Finish that. Make sure you enroll to the core program. Get matched with a technical mentor, and we'll go through it. We'll always have info sessions about these programs from next week as well. I know it's election week, but kazi iendelee. Let's not be deterred from the actual work. We go vote, we keep up doing the work, so we'll keep up the same mojo. From next week, we'll have 1-2 info sessions for those of you who want to join the core programs to come in. And if you're stuck on anything, whether it's joining Slack, whether it's a free course sort of thing, reach out to me or Faith, or even Chris, or anyone part of the team. Faith should be able to support you in the easiest way possible. Once again, it's easy to reach out to her if you're already available on Slack, right? And for any queries outside Slack, right, just do hello@zindoaschool.com and we'll be sure to say hello back to you. Awesome. That's it for today. I'll go ahead and kill the recording, and I hope you guys enjoyed the session as much as possible.